Hey everyone, thank you for tuning in for another episode of Paranomaly Beyond Disclosure. We are a weekly podcast dedicated to sincere, in-depth investigations into the paranormal, supernatural, and the metaphysical, with a special focus on the UFO topic. We take a sincere, analytical approach, thoroughly evaluating each case and its implications. Our discussions go beyond the surface as we engage with researchers, investigators, and experiencers to explore the deeper layers of their testimonies. We strive for high-resolution analysis, carefully examining evidence, patterns, and perspectives that challenge conventional thinking. If you're looking for a podcast that seeks deeper understanding, you're in the right place. Please be sure to like and subscribe and follow to receive notifications when new content is made available. You can also visit us at www.paranomalypodcast.com for more content and information, including all our social links. Thank you again for watching or listening, and we hope to see you on the next episode of Paranomaly Beyond Disclosure.
Welcome in, everybody. Today we have John Carpenter, and he previously has worked on MUFON, which is kind of it's a very legitimate organization that works with people who have been abducted or have abduction experiences, allegedly. And he would interview, talk to, work with people who experience this. And during that time, many, many years in MUFON, he learned that there were like different types of ET experiences via parallels of different people who experienced. And he learned a lot about the psychology of during the abduction, post-abduction, what would happen, along with just a massive wealth of knowledge all over the States and possibly other countries. I don't know. Were there other countries as well, John?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So just a very vast wealth of knowledge. And it's the second time on this podcast. And we are going to go deeper into that. And if people would like to see the first podcast after this one, that one is also available on the Paranomaly Beyond Disclosure YouTube site. But today we're going to go a little bit deeper and just kind of go on what resonates and see where the conversation takes us, because since the previous podcast that with John Carpenter, Jim has learned a lot. I am new here, but I have also learned a lot. So it's just going to go in a different direction just to delve deeper into John's expertise of the subject.
And we're going to start out focusing on the gray aliens. And we're going to kind of narrow our conversation, just limited to the gray aliens, and talk about the particulars and the details and differences between like the talls and the smallers, the females and the males, and the social structure, the appearance, and all that. I think the question that we should start out with first is, and I feel like with legacy abduction researchers like Bud Hopkins and John Mack, I feel like some mistakes have been made as far as kind of lumping in the aliens all together and putting them in one bucket. And it just seems like to me, after all the research that I've done, like there has got to be multiple species of grays. We have different colors. We have many different colors. I had a woman who was on the podcast recently who felt sure that the grays that she experienced had a bluish tint to them. I don't know if you've ever heard of grays with blue tint. We have different sizes. We have people who experience grays, that are 6-7 feet tall. We have ones that are 3.5 to 4 feet tall, like the common grays. Some people, I think you just recently, Heidi, ran into someone who claimed that the grays were as big as a large. or something.
Yeah, a large house cat is what they said.
Which I've never heard.
What?
The size of a large house cat. So you're talking like in movies or television, it would be the size of like a leprechaun.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, David Jacobs has actually written in his book, and I think he's specifically referring to the Greys, that people report them being anywhere from 2 feet tall to 4.5 feet tall, which I found confusing. I've never personally heard of a case. I've heard of people witnessing beings that were that small, but that weren't the Greys, that looked different from the Greys. But we also have, just a lot of variances with procedures, a lot of variances with, there's different types of tables and technology, in these craft that are used for the various procedures. Different clothing styles, some Greys. I don't know why I can't talk today. Some Greys wear like loose fitting clothing. Others have tight fitting clothing. Differences in behavior. Some Greys almost seem to kind of have a negative bent to them, have, not a very kind demeanor. And so it just seems to me like we've got to be dealing with different species. And what's your opinion, present day, John, as far as is there likely a multiplicity of gray species? Or
Well, if you just take Caucasians on this earth, we don't exactly all look alike. We have red-headed, freckled people. We have all sorts of different forms of Caucasians. So I'm not surprised there might be differences among the Greys. I typically saw in my cases the same type of gray, tall grays and short grays. The short grays were roughly about 4 feet, 4.5 feet tall. The taller ones might be a little more like 5.5, maybe. Not real tall, but definitely a little taller than the others. The short grays seem to be more almost robotic. Lyndon Moulton Howe often wondered if they were biological robots,
Yeah, I heard that in Dolores Cannon's speakings as well.
And that makes some sense. If you remember in Travis Walton's case, he had all these little grays around the table, and he fought back and swung at them, and they just suddenly stopped and all filed out of the room, like, abort. They just all filed out and left, and someone more in charge had to come in after that. So, the taller ones, whether they're 5 feet, 5.5 feet, whatever, they seem to have the more personal connection. Many abductees said they felt like they'd known that entity all their life, like even from when they were a little kid. Felt like they'd known, like there was a sense of familiarity. And the tall ones were usually ones that would bend down real close to their face and stare into their eyes, which was almost like taking a Valium. I mean, it was striking in every hypnosis session. My assistant and I would just wait for that moment because they'd be like all scared and shaking and wondering what's going on, where are they? And then all of a sudden they just, boom, just be calm. And I'd say, what happened? They said they stared into my eyes.
And
and
then
and do you think that there's oh sorry, Heidi, go ahead.
I was going to say, how is that drastically different from the interviews you had with people who experienced the short grays?
well, I always saw a combination. I mean, it seemed like in every case there was this combination. At least in my cases, there were. You had the shorter ones that were more about the business and the procedures, and then you have the tall ones, which is kind of like a supervisor, kind of floating around and kind of taking care of you. Maybe like an anesthesiologist would be in charge of your sedation or your comfort or any messaging to you. The little ones didn't seem to have any of that.
Okay.
If that makes any sense.
Yeah.
What about differences in appearance? From what I understand is there's pretty significant differences between the shorters and the tallers. The shorters are described as very smooth kind of skin, almost rubbery or plastic-like even. And the tallers sometimes are described as having kind of a leathery or kind of striated skin, sometimes with wrinkles.
Kind of like a porpoise,
Yeah.
a dolphin.
Doesn't that kind of suggest, it almost seems to me, just by those two descriptions, like the talls almost seem kind of more organic, like they could be the real aliens, and the shorters are maybe some kind of creation. Is that your thought too? Yeah.
Well, we have a lot of robots, don't we? We send them to the front lines when we explore planets. We don't send people first, so we send the robots first to drive around and take pictures and do all that and scoop up rocks and analyze stuff. And there's not a single human being in sight. But if there was, they'd be supervising everything.
Right.
And I think in a similar way, the smaller ones are doing their job, and they may be, like Linda Moulton Howe said, biological robots, which, if they're that far advanced, I'm sure they can make a darn good robot and make it in a similar appearance as themselves. Although,
Well,
like
no
you said,
different. Yeah. No
yeah,
different than humans are practicing.
right.
Mhm.
But I agree, the taller ones have more of an organic feel to them, more of that leathery skin, maybe more some wrinkles or something, not as smooth and polished as the little guys.
But the shorters, David Jacobs says in Secret Life that he does not agree with the notion that they're like robots and that they have no autonomy. He feels like he's had enough clients who have noticed the small grays make decisions or sometimes have a discussion relating to a problem with an abductee, in which they then
You
agree.
can easily compare that though to even ChatGPT.
I know. Well, that's
Exactly.
Yeah.
we have
Exactly.
ChatGPT.
Imagine that we made little robots that had all AI intelligence and could communicate with each other. So I think David was just a little, at the time he wrote that and did that, AI wasn't really in the picture, and we didn't really understand how awesome artificial intelligence could become.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
I'm sure they're way ahead of us.
they could absolutely be artificial. But there is sometimes, like, I know humor is rarely reported, but there are like rare instances. I don't know if you have any anecdotes, John, that you could
Oh,
share.
yeah.
There's one that David Jacobs, I think, wrote about in Secret Life, where one of the tallers snipped a lock of hair off of a female abductee's head and then seemed to put it up to the gray's head, its head. And this seemed to be, according to the abductee, and who knows, if their perceptions were right or not, it seemed to be like this amusing thing to the small grays that were observing the taller gray holding this lock of hair. If, there's, I don't know. I mean, isn't there maybe some signs occasionally in some accounts where the small grays even seem to show some consciousness, more consciousness than like an inner experience,
Well,
Do you have any anecdotes with humor or grays doing?
not during examinations or things on board the craft, but the funny things that they did were more by accident, like returning people, like a guy in a dress and the girl in the plaid flannel shirt instead of their first clothes, and maybe putting people back in the wrong beds and waking up going, "How did I get in here?"
Right. Sometimes in the wrong houses, even.
Yeah. So, yeah, there's a few things, and I'll think of more as we probably go along. But in terms of holding up a lock of hair and making the others chuckle or something, no, I've never heard anything like that.
Yeah,
Doesn't
he
mean
says
it didn't happen, though.
right. As far as the autonomous though of the small grays, do you feel like some people have, mentioned that they think that the grays have like a hive mind? And there are some observations where people witness grays seeming to move in unison. Now, I know this is not a constant. I think most accounts, they don't seem to move in unison, but there's definitely enough accounts like this to suggest that, sometimes this does happen, where they'll move towards an abductee, a number of different small grays, and they'll each step forward with their left foot or something like that. What do you think about the notions of hive mind? And
Oh, I think that's quite possible. Like I said with Travis Walton, when he made an unexpected move, they all just suddenly filed out together, like someone gave a command and they all just left. They didn't debate it, they didn't argue, they just like, oh, bye, and they all went out the room at the same time together. And most abductees aren't noticing some of these details. They're so emotional about what's going on, they aren't necessarily noticing their uniform movements, but they do feel like they're kind of robotic or really focused on their procedures, like they've done it a million times, and it's routine. And the interesting thing I find, because you might wonder about communication, the tall gray, which isn't that tall, but the one that's larger than the little ones, um, will often communicate to the abductee, much like a nurse does to a small child in a medical procedure.
mm-hmm.
Hold still, won't be long, you're okay. I'm going to send you home soon. You'll be all right. You won't remember this. Just reassuring little things, very matter of fact, very businesslike, but also just, kind of saying, you're okay. Everything's okay. You'll be fine. This will be over soon. And I heard that a lot.
Yeah, those reassuring statements. Do you think those are purely utilitarian, like they're just saying that because they want the abductee to be compliant and relaxed so that the procedure goes smoothly? Or do you think that it could be an indication that they do have some concern or care for the emotional states of
Well,
the
I think the first thing you said was more appropriate. It's just like in a doctor's office. They probably don't care what you're going to think about it later. Right then, at that moment, they want you to hold still. They want you to relax. They want you to cooperate with the procedure, and that's their main focus.
Now, what about though during like a mind scan or a staring procedure when an abductee feels this enormous sense of love coming from the tall gray? Some abductees have said, it felt like it loves me more than any human has ever loved me, and are really taken aback by this. Do you think, as David Jacobs thinks, that this is, like an artifice, this is kind of manipulative behavior in order to, sometimes these staring procedures in which the abductee feels the love precede like a reproductive procedure where they're going to, take eggs or something like that, and, it might make them compliant, prior to that? Or do you think that sometimes I think that there is an actual mind-to-mind link happening during the staring procedures, and what the abductee is feeling might be an actual representation of the mind of the gray? What do you think about that?
There's a lot of things I need to say about all that.
I have a theory about it.
Yeah, let me back up there. When they project a strong emotion like love or safety or nurturing or calming, that's all manipulative just to get the abductee into a different state. And the mind to mind, eye to eye, telepathic kind of link is extremely important because they are so powerful with their eyes. I mean, the first time I had an abductee see the eyes look into her face, she nearly jumped off the table, and I couldn't even sleep that night because it was so vivid, it was so intense when she first saw the eyes staring into her. But then she suddenly became very calm, and she said, they calmed me, they loved me, they made me feel good, and I'm not afraid anymore. And it's just amazing a person can go from abject terror to perfectly calm, like sedated within seconds. I mean, just seconds. So their eyes are very powerful. But the interesting thing is, most abductees I find have more telepathic abilities after their
That was
experiences.
gonna be my theory there
Yes.
going into.
Think of it like this. Think of a muscle that you've never used before, and then it gets exercised, and now you're able to use it better. Well, if telepathy is like a muscle in your mind that hasn't been used and they're exercising it constantly, you not only perhaps are more telepathic yourself after that, but you also know when they're in the area. You know when they're nearby.
Mm-hmm.
You just can sense that, and you can even sense messages from them even if they're not right there in front of you, because the telepathic link can linger or perhaps be activated anytime they
Right.
choose.
And that's why you think the abductee often sometimes way before an abduction takes place will start to get a sense of an impending abduction. Even
Yes.
when everybody's awake and their family's around, they'll start to get that sense, that there's going to be an abduction. It's the telepathic link that they're picking up on from the being, you think.
This goes directly into what John asked right before we started this, which for the viewers, I said, let's hold on to that for just a second and we'll see where this goes. Just because I didn't want to have the full conversation with John before this. But when I had my experience, which I'm 35 now, my experience had to be between the age of 31 and 32-ish. So this is about 3 years later. When I had my full experience to where I remembered things, to preface, it was very identical to a quote unquote dream that I had when I was, say, 3, 4, 5 years old. But now that I was 31, 32, and who knows, I think I was 3 or 4 or 5, but anyway, now that I was like 31, 32, I had been practicing meditation and the art of surrender. And I'm very good at it. I'm very good at surrendering to the point where I have no thought and I can just observe everything in that moment. I had been practicing this and I had a dream identical to when I was 3, 4, 5. And I was in a place, which was my car down the road in the dream. And then I was in awe at a ship coming over. The ship was humongous, like the size of my 2000 population city is what it looked like in the dream. And there were embossed symbols all over it. So not inlaid, but embossed, so out. And then snap, I was in the beam and I just remembered surrender, surrender, surrender. Just accept what's happening. And then snap again. I didn't remember any of the transitions of getting from the car to the beam or the beam to inside the ship. Then I was inside the ship on a table. I go like this for a table because you assume you're on a table because we would not know what it's like to be suspended. But I just assumed that there was a table and it felt metal, or I assume it was metal. And I was again conscious and I saw everything was blinding white. I couldn't see because it was so bright. And I saw the shadows of very tall, slender beings. They were very tall, so it wasn't short. I know it wasn't short because they were so far above me a little bit. And I said telepathically, intentionally, like I was conscious as can be, I said, I'm not afraid anymore, and then at the second I said, I'm not afraid anymore, I was thrust back into my bed in my bedroom. The sun was up. There was no wake up process. I had full energy. There was no wake up process. I was just awake and I had full recollection. And I ended up laying there for a second, kind of like skittering in my bed, like what just happened? Because when I did go back into what I would feel like was my body, because I still don't know if my physical body was put back into my bed with such force, or if it was like a vacuum that my soul got sucked back into my body. It was one of the two. Either way, I think it would have given a momentum. And I said to my husband as he woke up, I said, did anything happen last night? Because I was just like a journalist at this point. I wasn't emotionally super involved other than just being surprised. And he said, I feel like something happened, but nothing happened.
He
And I
said
was
that?
like, yeah, oh yeah, he said that. And I said again, I said, what does that mean? And he said, he looked at me, or like he didn't even look at me. He was kind of like confused. And he was like, I feel like something happened, but nothing happened. And I was like, okay. And I asked him a third time and he said it. And I was like, okay, I'm going to leave it there. And I had a toddler. I had 2 toddlers, who are older now. And then my oldest daughter, who was about 12, was in our basement, which was finished, beautiful basement. And her bedroom was directly under mine in the basement. So I went downstairs and I'm still looking at this analytically and not emotionally involved, kind of in a research perspective. And I said to her, did anything happen last night? And she said, I had a dream that I was in a house that I didn't know, and there were people walking around in the second floor above me. And I took a chair and I tapped on the ceiling, wondering who was walking around in the room above me. And that was her dream. So from those 3 situations of my experience, my husband saying he felt like something happened, but nothing happened, and my oldest daughter saying there were people walking around in the room above her. That's essentially the information that I have. And as far as the telepathic and different abilities, I have a slew. And I don't use them. I don't advertise them. I do nothing. I just exist in the moment. And that's essentially my experience. And I just wrote to MUFON about it.
Well, I have a question right off the bat. How many people out there remember a dream from 3 years old?
Oh gosh, from
No,
3
think about that. Think
yeah, I
about that.
know, yeah, and it was a
So,
parallel because in this dream that I had at 31, 32, that dream started off blaze orange sky, like the brightest orange, and I was in the car, and I was, like, essentially just in shock, and the dream that I had when I was 3, blaze orange sky, I did not see a UFO, but there was a giant yin-yang in the sky,
what's
and
that?
I didn't even know what a yin-yang was at 3.
Oh,
But
okay.
that stuck, and I also had that same shock, and in the 3-year-old dream, I was standing in a desert, and then I started running, and I was scared. So for me to have this again at 31 and say, "I'm not afraid anymore," I mean, the parallels are just everywhere.
Well, and anymore means that you were before. If you're not
Right.
afraid anymore, that means you used to be.
Yeah.
Now, um, most people that have these telepathic abilities started having experiences when they were young, like around 3, 4, 5, 6 years old,
Mhm.
because your brain has been practicing that for a long time. You said you had a slew of examples. Well, I'm not surprised, because my thought is it's highly unlikely you'd have the same dream at 3 and at 31 so alike if it wasn't part of a memory. And the thing with kids is they often remember things, but in a different way. Like aliens are real good at making you think that there's a 4-foot hamster in your room, or a 4-foot guinea pig, or a 4-foot fluffy puppy, or a 4-foot. I mean, I've had so many 4-foot critters that weren't really those critters, but the person believed that they were, so that they wouldn't be afraid. I mean, there's nothing like a big stuffed teddy bear 4 feet tall that makes you feel good. But when they look closer, they realize it's not a teddy bear.
Mhm.
But that's with hypnosis and a lot of work. But, you know, did you ever have other nightmares after that 3-year-old dream? I mean, anything else that was kind of
When I
upsetting through your
when I
life?
hit when I hit 14 years old, I started having night terrors
Mm.
where gray, lanky beings would crawl out of a portal in my ceiling, and they would drag me. My bedroom at that age, at 14, was in the basement, and they would drag me up the stairs, and I'd be clawing at the floor. And so I had extreme night terrors that led to they led to me almost kind of dying due to severe anxiety and
Mhm.
extreme paranoia. Lack of sleep led to hallucinations. I was
yeah.
scared to even turn corners, and I would hallucinate in school, and it was alleviated by visiting after therapy, psychiatrist, therapy, therapy, then psychologist, then psychiatrist. Um, None of the psychiatry stuff worked. They did try to put me on meds. It made it actually quickly worse. But it felt like my life force was being sucked.
Yeah. Well, first
Anyways,
of all,
a shaman was the
uh-huh.
one that fixed it immediately.
What did he do?
The shaman, she put me on a table, like a massage table, and told me to relax. And I almost immediately felt like I was hovering 2 feet above my body and felt kind of like my soul come back into my body. And she
Okay.
woke me up from this, from her practice. And
Okay.
I was essentially better from that moment on. I had to kind of relearn certain things. I realized that I had been, after that, I had a difficult time relating to other people.
Yeah.
And then once I chose to relate to other people, I got an extreme empathetic ability to where I can feel exactly what other people are feeling.
Mm-hmm.
And all of this stuff started to grow. And now my abilities are a lot. But
That's
I
great.
don't, yeah, I don't like, I don't think about it too much, because thinking about it and wondering why, I've found, hurts you more than just accepting and breathing with it, essentially.
Well, you certainly have classic symptoms of lifelong experiences and the resulting benefits with the telepathic and spiritual powers, you might say, even. Um, I will say anybody who's deprived in sleep is going to hallucinate. So it
Mhm.
doesn't surprise me that you'd have that. But it wasn't because you were schizophrenic. I can tell you that right now. There's
Right.
no way that was schizophrenia.
No,
Um,
it hasn't happened since either.
yeah. The thing is, all of my patients I would classify as post-traumatic stress disorder,
Mhm.
which basically means that um, you have reactions to something, nightmares, bad dreams, jumpiness, maybe not too social, maybe more withdrawn, more very careful and tenuous about things. And you don't even know why in this case. Like if you were raped or had a house fire or were in the war and, injured or something, yeah, you could explain, yeah, this is where it comes from. But all these people were having all these symptoms, and yet they didn't know where it was coming from. One guy, for example, had a phobia of falling up. In fact, I had two people who had phobias of falling up. How in the world do you develop a fear of falling up?
Mm-hmm.
And they couldn't explain it. They had to hang on to fences and railings and stuff, going out to their car and leap for their car and hang on to the car door. And they'd keep looking up at the sky. And they didn't know why they were doing that, but they just, had those reactions for no obvious reason at all. And then, of course, they found out later they were abducted, and the feeling of their feet leaving the ground was just terrifying. To be pulled up into the air, and that led to their fear of falling up. So, um, so you can have a lot of symptoms and dreams and stuff like that, but man, starting at 3 years old and then 14, which is right during puberty and all that, and then
That's what I was going
later
to
on,
say. Yeah, that's right at the age of puberty, and that's when
yep,
abductions typically start, right? Or the reproductive.
yep,
Yeah,
yep.
yeah.
So, and I think it sounds like you've handled that in your own way very well. I mean, you're not traumatized and unable to talk about it here. You're very open, and those abilities you've developed, I mean, those are your abilities. They've just been enhanced by the practice that you've had, maybe unknowingly, for all these years. Now, about the possibility of a soul leaving the body, I had one case, and I'm not sure that this is actually what happened to you, but I had one case in which the guy clearly was present. Everyone knew he was present, but he had an out-of-body abduction, and he'd had other experiences before, so it wasn't like his first time. But I guess the link was so strong they could actually interact with his soul and return that and he would return to his body. And I know people can have out-of-body experiences without being abducted. I mean, many people have proven that they've done experiments and traveled outside their body. And I'm not talking about near-death experiences, which I've researched extensively, but just out-of-body experiences can happen. And so I think if the person is perhaps has those telepathic abilities or that mind link, it's possible that that could happen that way. But almost all my cases were physical in nature. And I've had people where they were sleeping in the bed and the mate says, "No, you were here last night, I think. I remember I looked over once and you weren't there, and so I thought maybe just got up and went to the bathroom, but the door wasn't open, and so I just went back to sleep. But then when I turned over the next time, you were there." So sometimes people will witness an absence or a funny feeling about what happened that night. And I'm wondering if your daughter, has she ever reported anything that makes you think she might have had experiences?
My oldest daughter, so actually my middle daughter is unbelievably sensitive to things, and my youngest daughter has a crippling fear of heights.
Mm-hmm.
And my oldest, but she's 6, so but
Doesn't
I did
matter.
put that together as you said. Yeah, I put that together as you said. And then my oldest is just highly intelligent. Just
Mm-hmm.
highly. She has graduated high school by sophomore year with a 4.0, and she is now going into, or she's going to graduate with an associate's degree. She still has the 4.0. And to her, things are common sense. And I feel like even say I have a day and I'm stressed, she just knows things and she's just very good at everything. And I feel like if anything, she, without trying to, grounds me, but I feel like she knows vastly more than she lets on.
Okay.
So,
Well, the reason I ask is because it's very common that when someone is selected, and we looked at this, David Jacobs and Bud Hopkins and John Mack and I, we looked at this over and over and over again. We looked at blood types and cultural and all sorts of things to see how a certain person is selected. We never could find any similar thing that would predict someone's possibility of being more abducted than someone else. In fact, David Jacobs made a joke and said, "I know how they select them. There's one, get him."
yeah.
And now here's the point, though. Once selected, though, I've had numerous cases where they go as much as 4 generations. It's like what a scientist would call a longitudinal study, where you track one line of genetics over several or many generations. And even with Betty Hill, I know Kathleen Martin, she's had some experiences and she's related to Betty Hill. That's her aunt, and she was a niece. Um, and, but many others. And so that's why I was just curious about your children. I don't know if your mom or dad or anybody in your family has ever seen UFOs or had any weird experiences, but they may not talk about it because often people just won't.
Mhm.
But I don't know if you've ever asked them or ever heard them say anything that might be suspicious too.
The most would be just that my grandpa on my father's side was a trucker and he drove just countless hours all over the United States. And my dad's side is just, to sum it up, sensitive. And some of them have coping mechanisms to an unhealthy scale.
Hmm.
But they all are sensitive and care greatly about things, but they're just, you sum it up and they're weird. There's just weirdness. But then you look at, like,
I'm
say
glad you said
my
that.
dad's brother, completely normal, you
Okay.
know? So there is like you can literally, if I were to use like say how do energetically do I relate to XYZ people, it's far harder for me to relate to people who don't have like I guess like this energetic imprint,
Sure.
and I can feel when somebody does.
Sure. I understand that.
So yeah, it would be my dad's side. But specifically my dad, not my dad's brother. Like it's like a one person. It's not it's not like siblings necessarily that are
Right.
aware or remember that connection.
Right. Right.
It's
Because then,
there's a very real difference to people who are just don't be that way. And then other people who are like, no, I experience the world differently.
yeah, in the generations, it wouldn't be everybody just like this person randomly here, but not the brother or sister, or maybe the grandmother, but not the
Right.
grandfather. And, it's just like getting a sampling from each genetic line, whoever it might have been. And we saw that a lot. Even when I worked with Linda Moulton Howe on her famous Cindy Doherty case, Judy Doherty, who was
Mhm.
in her Emmy Award winning film on cattle mutilations.
Sure.
She had that experience, and Dr. Leo Sprinkle did the hypnosis. Well, 10 years later, I happened to have the opportunity to work with Cindy Daugherty, Judy's daughter, and Linda came to Springfield here in Missouri with her film crew, uh, funded by Bob Bigelow, who was also tagging along. And they set up, and the daughter Cindy had no clue what her mother remembered. Never read anything, didn't care about it. Thought her mother was probably half crazy, but she did admit that she'd seen the same UFO, and the car had pulled over, and then she doesn't remember what happened for 2 hours. But she never explored it, didn't care about it, and I met with her ahead of time. And she was just like, yeah, we'll do this, but I don't expect to remember anything. I mean, because I just think it's all a bunch of baloney. Well, that was great. I mean, good attitude to start with. Um, and what was revealed was a 3-hour hypnosis session where she recalled seeing the calf being pulled up in the blue beam of light, just like her mother had, being beamed up aboard with her mom, seeing the cattle mutilated on board the craft, like her mother had, and then lying on a table. And if you remember, mother was screaming, "Oh my God, that's my daughter. They're going to cut her up next." And the daughter remembers lying on the table, seeing her mother all upset through a window looking into the room. So it matched up beautifully, perfectly. And when she got done with this 3-hour session, which she thought was only 15 minutes long, by the way, that's hypnosis for you. It's kind of like when you go to sleep at night, it doesn't feel like you're there for 8 hours. It might feel like you're only there for 2 hours. But um, anyway, she looked at me and she goes, "Did I say anything that made any sense?" We all just like wanted to break out laughing. It's like,
Yeah.
"Oh my God, you just verified everything in your mother's case." And she goes, "I did?" She didn't know. So, and when Linda filmed the pilot for the series Sightings, she used part of that session in her pilot show for the series Sightings that was on during the 90s. And now, further note, Cindy had this phobia of dolls, the older kind that have the kind of creepy faces, from like the 1950s or 40s or something.
Yeah, my oldest daughter has a phobia of dolls.
Well, this is interesting because she didn't understand why she had that. In fact, she wouldn't even let her own daughter, Cindy wouldn't let her own daughter even have dolls because it was just too creepy. Well, during one session, I did a follow up after this amazing session. She recalls seeing a room full of hybrids, and she looked at them and she goes, "Oh my God, those are my dolls." And then she realized that the weird looking little human aliens or hybrids were that creepy kind of look that the dolls had. And now she finally understood why she couldn't stand having dolls and why she wouldn't let her own daughter have dolls. After that, she broke down and let her daughter have dolls. But again, another phobia unexplained until she remembered seeing the hybrids in a room. But there again, another generation. And she even said that her own daughter, who was 14 at the time, was starting to talk about some experiences. So there you have mother Judy, daughter Cindy, and now Cindy's daughter, all talking about possible, so it's just amazing, how you can track that sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I've heard also babies being terrified by the mother wearing dark sunglasses, and
Yeah.
like Bob Hopkins felt that there was something with that. Certain babies who had an abductee mother, I think, would be terrified of the mother wearing a dark sunglasses, which
Yep.
resembles maybe the large black eyes of a gray.
That bothers all ages.
That's
But
so funny. I refuse to wear sunglasses. I had no reason. I
Yeah,
just
right.
refuse to wear them. I feel like it like hides my soul. Was my explanation.
Folks, she says there's no reason.
Yeah.
Well, it could be just a coincidence.
Oh, sure.
Well, it's more things like that we often just pass off and think, that's probably nothing. And suddenly it just all starts to add up sometimes. And, luckily when I did my research, which was basically from 1989 through about 1998, there was, up until about 95, there was nothing on TV. There was, if you're lucky, if you saw one special on UFOs and over a whole year, maybe on Unsolved Mysteries, and we'd maybe pray and hope they might do a show on it, and they might once a year. There was no cable TV. There was no, huge array of UFO specials on. There was no little grays on T-shirts. There was no cartoon little grays. There was no ET mindset. None of that was there yet. So when we did our research, it was perfect because no one really should or could know hardly anything.
Right.
And I actually started getting out of it when there was so much on TV and people were learning so much. I didn't know how much would be contaminated by what they'd seen or heard or
Right.
wanted to believe. So I just kind of took more selective cases after that, especially with multiple people involved. I kind of did a lot of those, which was nice.
Because with multiple people, you can get kind of corroboration from the other person, regressing another person, kind of can corroborate the first person. Is that what you mean by?
Like Judy and her daughter Cindy, that was just perfect. Right. I mean, and I was so glad Linda was filming that because we had no idea if anything would even come out of it. We were just going to take a shot at it and see what she might remember. In a 3-hour in detail. I mean, she had descriptions of the aliens, everything. I mean, more than you could even hope for. And yet she didn't even believe in this stuff when she started the session. And then when she was done, she thought it was all crazy and she couldn't have possibly matched anything her mother said. So
I will say I haven't told my kids anything of my experiences because the sole reason being that there's no way that in any way, shape, or form this would help them in life.
Not yet.
Yeah,
if
at least
they have
not
problems
yet.
later on, then it might be helpful, yes. But right now, it's okay.
I haven't said
unless they're having
anything.
terrible nightmares and they really are falling apart. I mean, that's
right.
Then, yeah.
Can we get back to the Greys and talk about their intelligence and what observations have been made by abductees that would give some idea as to Grey intelligence? I know there's some peculiar things that make me think that they kind of have a narrow intelligence, that their intelligence and their knowledge base is very specific to whatever their purpose for. And they also don't seem to understand, Bud Hopkins always felt that they don't seem to understand human emotions. There's instances where abductees will resist strongly. One occasion where a mother was witness to her son going through the semen extraction procedure and was outraged at this and got a reaction from the Greys, which gave her the impression that they had no idea why she was upset at that.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well, I
what do you?
wouldn't call it intelligence. I would talk it a lack of understanding. Just like if we went to another planet and we saw them doing something really different or unusual, we'd probably like be totally lost or puzzled as to what's going on or why a person would be upset. And so when they come here, part of the theory is that they have over-evolved. Imagine if you're sitting in front of your computer screen for the next 1,000 years. I think your body would atrophy. You'd probably lose your sex organs because everything could be done in the lab now, and you wouldn't need them anymore. Your eyes would get big because you're using them all the time on the screens, right? And if your telepathy is advanced, you don't even need to open your mouth or make any sound, that way. So if you imagine just evolving to that point, and especially if sex is laboratory created and they aren't emotionally really involved or connected with each other, if you can just imagine for a moment us turning almost into AI robots, and then you come back to find a species that's doing all this emotional stuff and having nurturing babies and emotional reactions to things and getting angry or upset. I mean, it's going to be like, we're not used to this. And so many times, Bud and I and Sean Mack, we talk about the emotional tests that they often would do. Like they would create a scene as if you're in front of your boss and your boss has just fired you or something, or or that you're to pick up a gun and shoot your boss and see how that feels. I mean, just some really weird scenarios that would be created, and they wanted to see what the human would do or how the human would react. And then as soon as they had a reaction, the scene would just dissolve, disappear, as if it was all a projected series of images. And then the aliens would be like conferring, like, okay, yeah, that was good, kind of like scientists, having finished an experiment. And the abductees like going, what the hell happened here? What I thought I was in my boss's office. What's going on here?
So do you think it
So
was all about the kind of staging and testing procedures? Do you think it's all about learning and
yes.
trying to comprehend human emotions?
I
Yes.
do want to say there's a wild parallel there for me,
Okay.
because I do feel like I was subconsciously over the years almost pushed at the same time as guided into knowing how to not react to anything and be an observer of emotion to the point where like something can be scary, something can be aggravating, but I'm able to switch into the observer mode to not react, and there would be no explanation as to like why I can do that so easily.
Well, and you're right. There could be a number of reasons they could have influenced you in that way, or you could have learned that in watching them, watching you. And also just from PTSD, it might have been your way of coping with things, learning how to not react to some of those things. So there's a lot of possibilities, but that is an interesting parallel there.
Yeah.
Let's see. I think your question, let me see. There was some part of that question I don't think I'd answered yet that you asked, Jim.
My question. Well, so I was just talking about intelligence. What do you think about general intelligence, like their capacity to kind of figure things out? There's some things that make me think that they might not even be that great at general intelligence. There's one case, I think this was one of David Jacobs's clients, where the abductee had a retainer, some kind of dental mouth retainer or something that fit in her mouth that she would sleep with. And she woke up and there was some weird circumstances and things, and the retainer was sitting on her chest. And so she thought she might have had an abduction experience that night, and she did. And during the experience, they took the retainer out of her mouth with no trouble at all. They were able to remove it out of her mouth. But whenever it came time to put it back in,
They
They
didn't know how to do it.
could not figure it out. And I guess they
Right.
struggled for a long time trying to figure it out.
Well, there again, I don't think it's a
Eventually gave
lack
up.
of. I don't think it's a lack of intelligence. I think it's a lack of understanding what
Mhm.
that's for or how it works. Or, I mean, likewise, if we took something out of an alien's mouth, we probably wouldn't get it back in right either. We wouldn't even know how to begin to put it back in there probably.
Right.
Um, but so I think that now the little grays are more procedural, and I don't think they often understand a whole lot of things. But the taller ones seem to have a great deal of intelligence, or at least willingness to learn if they don't understand something. I mean, one of the most common things that they like to observe is the way an abductee would nurture her hybrid baby. They would hand it to her, have her hold it, then they'd all crowd around and watch her as she would nurture it and love on it, because they hadn't done that. They got away from all that probably, or they never did have anything like that. They probably are all recreated in labs or something, and they wanted to see how to really mother that child, and that was very, very, very common to have them want to observe how the woman would nurture her child.
Hmm. Sometimes, though, it's almost as if the tall grays are instructing the abductee what to do in the case of child presentation. Though, like there's some weird instance of that where a tall gray is taking the hand of an abductee and instructing the abductee mother to press your hand tightly. It was taking her hand and it was putting it on the baby's abdomen and putting huge pressure on the baby, to the point where she thought that if it was a regular baby, the baby would cry out, it just the
Yeah.
pressure. And at the end of that, she felt, though, that the response from the baby was that it needed that somehow, and that
Hmm.
the tall gray was right to kind of apply that same kind of pressure. So there's, some interesting things about sometimes, where it's almost like they're instructed, what to do. Like the tall grays know something, about what at least the hybrid babies need.
Well, and that's something we wouldn't understand. Whether pressure on the butt, makes you feel good. If you're
Mm.
an alien baby, they would know that, and they'd want to see her learn how to nurture the baby in that way, maybe teaching her. Because I think part of it is observing what she does and then maybe teaching her what else she might need to know about dealing with that hybrid.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And is it also the case that males, a lot of the time, I didn't realize that males ever experience child presentation, but they do from time to time, or at least the one abductee, this was oh, one of Yvonne Smith's clients, who she wrote about in, I
Hmm.
think, Chosen. He would get child presentation after every semen extraction procedure. It was like routine. There would be the semen extraction procedure, and then they would present him with the baby. And he was really, really young. I think he was like single digits, I think, at times. And they would give him a baby, and he'd be just totally perplexed by it. They would indicate to him that this was his baby, but he just, he didn't understand, how this could be his baby. And he would just, obviously he couldn't feed the baby or anything, but they would have him hold the baby, and then they told him to push the baby tight to your chest for like 5 minutes or so, and then he would give back the baby. You ever heard of many males having child presentation, or is that kind of maybe a rare thing?
I think that's a rare thing, and that might be why she wrote about it. I know Yvonne, and it might be why she wrote about it. I've never had a male, but I'm not surprised, because I think that they would be curious how the male would nurture or handle a baby too. The mothers, I mean, the ones who gave birth to the babies or had their eggs united with the alien, stuff to create a hybrid. That's why they were always more involved, because it came from them. It's part them. They gave birth to it, so to speak. So um,
Mm-hmm.
that was why that was so much more common. But I'm not surprised that they might show a male and see what his reaction would be. Everything's
Right.
about learning about our emotions and learning about our reactions.
and it seems like in some cases that they just need physical human contact with the baby, and anyone. There was an occasion where a woman, sometimes happens with women abductees. She rejected the baby. She wanted nothing to do with the baby at all, and they could not get her to hold the baby. And so her brother was abducted with her, and they gave the baby to the brother to hold, and that seemed to suffice, for their purposes.
Yeah.
I have a question. So, and this is just like a wild theory I'm just throwing out there. I'm just curious of John's perspective on it or thoughts. Doesn't it seem a little bit like if AI got so advanced and that advanced and it could hack time because everything is a mathematical construct, doesn't it seem kind of like if AI went on a trajectory and if people got so involved with screens and infertile things happened, and there's cases of things being AI-like in nature, like the organic beings that operate on a mathematical system, the small grays, which we talked about, that would like all went out at the same time or got in order. Does it not seem to a point like it could just be like a future race that was also created by us and I'm specifically talking about the grays at this time.
Sure.
But is that out of like, I mean, is there any resonating factor with that idea?
Well, and that's why I kind of suggested that if we had evolved that far, that's what we might end up looking like.
Right.
And, it makes some sense when you think about that if we were highly evolved, that might be exactly what we might look like. But the time travel type thing where they could hack time and travel back and try to, what we often as researchers said were to like integrate back into their population the things that they had over evolved out of, like emotions and nurturing and relationship connections, and the things that we're showing them that they don't understand anymore because they've gone too far. So that idea's come along, but I have one thing that gets in the way of that.
And that's what I was curious. There's got to be something that gets in the way.
Yeah.
Well, and that's because I knew Leonard Stringfield, and he had been in the military, and his role in the military was to collect UFO reports. When he got out of the military, he decided to keep doing that on the civilian side. Although the military strangely acknowledged that they didn't know him or didn't know him to be doing any such things. But anyway, because he was a trusted person that had been in the military, he told me that he had as many as, and he's written some books. I think one's called The Red Siege or something, and he was a high up in MUFON for a while, or a highly respected part of it. But he had as many as 650 independent military witnesses come forth to him because they trusted him to tell him the information, and they knew that he wouldn't reveal their identities, and they could unload their experiences or what they had observed to him. And he told me personally, and I have all this on video, he told me personally that there were as many as 30 crashes and at least 30 bodies retrieved. And things like military guy was sent down to fix an air conditioning unit in an underground base. And as he's down there, he sees lying on tables, alien bodies, And then at the same place, another repairman reports he saw the same kind of thing when he went down to fix something else. So these people would come forth, and because they're all independent, they would verify places, events, operations. The retrieval group was known as the Blue Berets. And all this Leonard Stringfield very carefully documented, and he was highly respected and trusted. Um, and one thing I wanted to tell you is he had several autopsy reports. And this is where I have the problem with the time travel thing, because he said that ironically, they had no bone structure and they were more like vegetables than humans. And okay, I cannot
But
explain that,
yeah,
but
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I think if you really look at the details of the gray and you take stock of all the various features, they start to look less and less human and more alien like for instance, they don't seem
okay.
to breathe. They don't seem to interact with the atmosphere. There's been occasions where David Jacobs has had a client under regression who was very close to the gray's face, maybe during mind scan or something, tell him whether or not he could notice breathing of any kind, coming from the gray, and they always say no. They
yeah,
always say no.
yeah,
uh, yeah, there doesn't seem to be any boniness that anybody
no.
has observed. There doesn't seem to be any musculature
There's
or
no teeth.
like that. There's no teeth.
Yeah.
Some people have witnessed
Okay.
like a palate of some kind.
Hmm.
There have been occasions, yeah, where people have seen the grays open their mouth, but
But they
but
don't eat or drink anything. I mean, no one's seen them eat or drink anything.
right, yeah.
And and there's no bone structure, and the organs just are not like anything we have at all, he said. And the whole tissue and everything reminded more of a vegetable and something organic material rather than human flesh and blood and bones and all that. So that's why the time travel thing kind of just, I mean, it's a neat
I'm happy to
theory.
have that debunked. That was just something that I thought
Yeah.
it didn't like resonate, but I just wanted it debunked a little bit.
Well, and even though it's an interesting theory, and I can see how people would definitely get into that, but then knowing the actual structure and characteristics of the grays and little grays, nah, it just doesn't fit.
I'm
Just
glad
doesn't.
that
Yeah,
doesn't fit.
yeah.
Yeah, and the arms and legs are the same diameter from the shoulder to the hand. Apparently, like there's no differentiation in diameter.
No,
On there's no sort of there's no belly or anything. Although some
no,
people, there's variances, and I know one person who claims to see a little bit of a paunch,
no
but no,
belly button. No,
yeah, there's no belly button,
no
no
sex organs.
organisms.
No male or female. You asked that before about male and female grays. I've never heard of any sex associated with any of them.
Oh, but there are in fact abductees who feel like they do sense a gender, like
Well, that can be
that can be
created.
sure,
Yeah.
yeah.
In fact, many thought that they were having sex and realized it was all
Mm.
imagery and that there was nothing there to really insert or, have. They felt the sensations, they could have orgasms, and yet there wasn't really sex organs there. Now, I will say the reptilians can do it, but we're not talking about reptilians.
Right.
Some women have loved the reptilians and they hated that, but they said they have the best sex. So, not Grace.
My middle daughter, who has like really heightened experiences, she actually has like an unexplainable fascination with snakes, lizards, and reptiles of all sorts. I mean, and I just took her, she's 8. I just took her to a reptile expo, and that's just her thing.
Well, that could just be her thing.
Yeah, I don't assume a gosh darn thing.
She wants to take him to bed and sleep with him. I might start worrying.
That no, not yeah, thank you. I definitely not.
But sometimes inexplicable fascinations with things can be a sign of something in an
Sure,
abductee. There are
sure.
abductees who have like an inexplicable fascination with UFOs and aliens. And then there are some abductees that have a revulsion for the subject, that when the subject is brought up, they just do not want to talk about it.
Well,
And
see, if she was having dreams of reptiles and stuff, and had just
No,
seen a
I think
UFO
she just
after the car was stopped and saw a bright light in the sky, and then started dreaming about reptiles and wanted to collect them, yeah, that'd be pretty
I think
suspicious.
she just prefers animals in general to people a lot. But also, she did just tell me about a dream that she had where there was a big chef that broke into our house, and he was going after all the family members, and he was trying to kill us. And just as before he was about to get her, he was shooting fireballs out of his hand. And just before the fireball hit her face, she woke up.
Okay.
Oh.
Well,
She does have pretty extreme dreams.
you should have her draw pictures. A lot of
Yeah.
drawings reveal some very interesting details that they aren't able to describe, but they can picture it. And drawings are amazing.
Yeah.
Sometimes that tells you a lot.
She didn't speak a lot until she was about 4-ish. When she was 4, we were playing Pictionary. And my version of Pictionary was I would start drawing something and she has to guess what it is. And she was like, my turn. And I said, okay. And I did things like a washer, a grocery store, a microwave, a faucet, like simple things for a 4-year-old. And she started drawing, and I couldn't figure out what it was. And it was a line, and there was like squiggle and this stuff. And I said, I can't figure it out. What is it? After a bunch of guesses. And she said, it's a car driving on a bridge at nighttime, and it goes off of the bridge and falls into the water.
Okay.
Yeah. Like, I mean, there's a lot going on there, but again, like, this is all just stuff that I just observe and I don't draw conclusions, but it's just weird stuff.
Well, sometimes you can have her draw that, and then all of a sudden there's this strange yellow disc in the sky as she draws it, and you go, what's that? Oh yeah, I forgot to tell you, that was in the sky.
Yeah, right. Maybe I'll do a little bit more.
Yeah.
But
sometimes they're just creative, and it's coincidence. I'm real careful. If you can have any other explanation, I'll be the first one to look at that. But there are patterns, and like as you started to tell me more about your life, I thought, there's definitely a pattern going on here.
Yeah.
I don't know any dream I can remember from 3 years old. I don't know of any other person I've ever talked to that can remember a dream.
MUFON they say that they are going to get in contact with me to see how I'd like to move forward. So we shall see how it goes.
Well, you can always contact me anytime you want.
Okay. And that's good for like viewers and people who watch this in the future to know too, just about MUFON, because I don't think that there's as clear, like you can say MUFON, but I feel like a lot of people don't exactly know what MUFON is, the legitimacy and the step-by-step situation. So for viewers also, there is an actual questionnaire. If you even remotely think you've been abducted, there's a questionnaire that you fill out that's extremely detailed, and you can just be as detailed as you possibly can in that. You don't have to.
Well, let me explain MUFON real quick.
I guess.
It originally was the Midwest UFO Network, created out of Illinois, I believe, and then moved to Texas, and then it became the Mutual UFO Network, which really was a bunch of volunteers who wanted to research the phenomenon. But then what they did was they enlisted, I think it was at least 50 different scientific disciplines. I mean, like from photography to geology to soil samples to, you name any possible scientific type of analysis all over the world. They had countries and different countries and everything. They'd have a director for each country, and then they would divide up the countries like they do United States. And so you had a nice network all over the country, all over the world, and they would keep track of sightings all over the world and frequency. And then we would we had at the famous MIT conference in, I think it was about 92, 91, somewhere around that time in Boston at MIT. I was part of that, and
I sent that to you, or no? Oh no, I sent you one of those. Yeah, but that's on YouTube. That 1992 MIT conference.
Yeah, and we had researchers from all over the world, and like at one point, I remember Bud Hopkins and David Jacobs were thinking at that time that reptilians and tall blondes and all that, and praying mantis beings were all like fictitious and suggestions by the gray aliens to think of them as different beings. And I didn't believe that. I had, and I knew others. So I had the chance in front of all these researchers from around the world to say, how many of you have had reptilians in your cases? And 80% of the hands went up from around the world. And then I said, how many of you had praying mantises? And about the same number, 80% of the researchers from around the world indicated that. And I looked at Dave and Bud, and they were like, oh, crap. They realized, oh, I guess there is maybe more to it.
I've heard some fascinating stuff from the mantis experiencers.
Yeah.
And it usually has some sort of strange healing or positive message associated with it.
Yeah, that's probably a whole nother show, but
Yeah.
We'll save that for another show then, if you know a lot about it.
I will say, when I went to Australia, I got to meet with this wonderful young lady there, and she'd had experiences, and she looked at me and she goes, but mine are really weird. I mean, have you ever heard of a praying mantis creature? And I said, yeah. She goes, really? She goes, I didn't know anyone else had ever seen that down here in Australia. I mean, I've had that, and then also these lizard-like things. And I said, yeah. So it was pretty cool to be in Australia and to have an abductee there, just find out that she's not alone in the world, that others have seen the same kinds of things.
Yeah, we have someone who's going to be on at the end of December who she didn't know there was anybody else, and we'll be talking about her experience, and she was a mantis individual.
Very good.
Mm-hmm.
Before we close out, John, I wanted to ask you, have you ever had any clients who have resisted? I feel like some of the most interesting stories about abductions come from those who occasionally will resist, maybe by doing things like prior to abduction, like tying themselves, using video cameras, or even sometimes while on board. There's occasions where an abductee, where for whatever reason they're in a more lucid state. Normally I think that they're not conscious enough to even think or do this, but they'll get up and run somewhere. And I find these cases really interesting because you get to hear about some behaviors from the Greys they're really unusual when the routine is disrupted. Have you ever had any interesting cases where people have tried to resist or tied themselves or upset the Greys? Have you ever heard of cases where people have witnessed the Greys seeming to get irritated and displeasured by something, and seem to have that kind of emotion?
I wouldn't call it emotion. I would call it a disruption in their procedures. And, like anybody, just throws you off if something unexpected happens. I know David Jacobs said that one abductee swung and hit an alien in the face. He just punched him out, and maybe even broke his neck when he did that. But creature was,
I mean, as much as you can with no bones.
right. I mean, it's like beheading a cabbage or something. I don't know.
Right.
David Jacobs had one abductee who actually grabbed a hold of one of the necks one time and got a sense of what it feels like. And according to this abductee, the neck is solid. The neck feels like a very solid thing, which it must be, because there's the strange thing about, how does the neck support the head, and a lot of abductees are always confused by it.
Probably a steel rod in there.
Or something sturdy, yeah.
Yeah, not like our necks,
Unless they hold themselves largely because there's no gravity.
That's what I was actually going to ask you that question. Is there ever 0G witnessed on board? It doesn't seem like there is.
No. And here's why. And Bob Lazar, with Area 51, said that these crafts generate their own gravitational field.
Right.
This is why they can zip through water, from the air into the oceans and out again without, or turn at great speeds on a dime, because it's almost like your own little earthly planet, with your own gravitational field. And, here we are spinning around at 18,000 miles an hour right now, and we don't feel anything. when we're rotating the Earth. We're moving at a very fast speed, but we don't feel any sense of
I
moving
feel like
this.
that's why I felt partially like I perceived a table, because almost like my own ego would be like, there has to be something you're laying on. But if you think of it in the sense that they have their own gravitational field,
Right.
it could be perfectly balanced so that the ET is just, their jelly body is just kind of suspended.
Yeah.
But we really could be in like a not gravity down, but also not gravity up, and be in the middle.
Yeah. Well, and you may have been on a table because
Yeah.
the way your state would have been so relaxed, you probably didn't even notice, you know. It's I've never heard of just floating in the air when they got the tables. They're always laying on a table and they
Yeah,
see
people
each
say
other.
table.
Yeah, and they see each other laying on tables. They haven't
Yeah.
reported seeing people just floating in the air.
All right.
So probably just very relaxed. And you could have a floating sensation, even laying there. So,
No, I felt the table. I just always felt weird that I didn't actually see the table.
oh, well, you're on top of it.
Yeah.
Good questions, you guys.
Just a couple more.
Sure.
As far as recent abductions, I know you said last time that you still take occasionally clients.
Mm-hmm.
Are you noticing any differences or changes, different patterns nowadays with, are people still witnessing the small grays at all? I don't know if there's enough of a pattern yet to make this conclusion yet, but I'm talking to some abductees who are having recent abductions, and they all describe grays which are very tall, like 6 and 7 foot tall. And it seems like you rarely, or at least from my investigations, you rarely hear about people witnessing the small grays anymore. Do you think there's anything changing with abductions as far as the types of grays or beings that people are seeing or encountering?
I've not really heard of anything, and especially any distinct pattern or anything. As far as I hear, it's still the same old stuff. It got to be so predictable when I was in my research that I could look at my assistant and I said, "You know what's coming next?" And they go, "Yeah." And sure enough, that would be the next thing that would happen in the abduction. It really got to be a pretty predictable procedure that would happen. From the calming to the exploration to samples taken to the reassuring words, and then all of a sudden floating back to your bed and being dropped into your bed. Sometimes, people drop 2 feet into their bed and plump and kind of wakes them up. It's not always a soft landing. So, but and the reactions of feelings and stuff are all the same. The UFOs seem to be pretty much the same. And I see, these videos and stuff on TV, and I thought, yep, there's that again. Yeah, there's that again, and doesn't really, don't see anything real strikingly different. I will close out with this idea. I see my phone's about to lose power soon. um, I say, imagine that you have 100 people go to a movie theater and they all watch, let's say, Wicked, all right, since that's popular right now. And they all see the same film at the same time with the same characters, the same music, the same songs, all that, and they come out of the theater. Now, are you going to have those 100 people all say the same thing about the movie? No. Some will say, "Oh, I didn't like it. It bothered me. I fell asleep." Another person, "Oh, it's the greatest film in the world." Another person would say, "Well, I only liked this one part, and the rest of it I didn't care for." Another person said, "It really bothered me. I couldn't stand it." Now, when people have an alien encounter, you take those same 100 people and run them through the exact same alien encounter. Some are going to come back and say, "Oh, I feel spiritually evolved." Others will say, "I feel raped and molested." Others feel, "I'm traumatized." Another person says, "I'm so glad they picked me." And yet, when I
Right.
look at the details, there's nothing different.
Some people really want to see that movie, and some people never want to see it.
Right, exactly. and your recollections of what you saw in the movie, what you remember, how you remember it is all going to be different. You're not going to have 100 people talk the same way. And so I often thought about that with alien encounters, because I kept saying, well, the same thing happened, but they have a whole different take on it. They have a whole different reaction to it. And yet it's the same thing that I got last week with someone else who, felt different way about it. So
Right.
when they go out and then sell their books and talk on talk shows, they have a certain angle. Well, they're this and they're here to do this and blah, blah, blah. And I'm thinking, well, that was your reaction. That's your opinion,
That's essentially why I haven't, that's definitely why I haven't read about other people's experiences, because every single time that I start, I feel that it's so emotionally involved. It usually is emotionally involved. It's very difficult to find other experiencers who don't have an emotional involvement.
Well, I'd be glad to talk to you anytime about your stuff. I would very much enjoy that, because I think you have a good head on your shoulders and an objective view of things, but you also know what you've been through.
Sure.
So that would be a pleasure.
Yep. I will reach out for sure. Anything else,
Okay.
Jim? Did you have another question? I know you said you had a couple.
No, I guess we'll finish out. Well, I just said, I guess, one more question, though. So, John, you think that the hybridization program, the creation of hybrid babies, do you think that that is still ongoing, that that is still in full swing, just like it was in your day?
Probably. I don't know why they would stop. I think they're either trying to kind of get back into their population of things that they've lost by mixing with us. Some people think they're trying to populate our planet and infiltrate. I think they have easier ways. If they wanted to take over our planet, it'd already be done. I don't think
It just seems like the more the time goes on and that's not happening, it seems likely.
So the conclusion is that, like, the biggest question at the end of the grays, the biggest thing that has no actual, even a witness answer, is the true direct motive.
I think it's all for their sake, for their
Mhm.
study, for their information, for their learning, and for their evolution and changes. If you think about it, and really think about this, they come and secretly try to do this without being really detected. And if they are detected, they try to convince you that you're not going to remember it, or you're going to remember it as a 4-foot squirrel and not an alien. They're not trying to upset us directly. I don't never felt any evil or direct intent to harm. It's more like they want to come in, secretly study us, learn what they can, do what they need to do, and get out. And they've been doing that very well for, gosh, 50, 60, 70 years. And,
But what
so
about all the sightings? But what about just the multi? I mean, just there's just infinite sightings that happen all the time, which to me, kind of contradicts. I mean, not to make this drag on longer, but I was just wondering, there
I
seems
don't
to be.
think those are all abductions. I think they're monitoring us. When we set off a nuclear test, boy, the Southwest was filled with flying crafts that summer, with Roswell actually happening at the same time. But they had more sightings and more things happening after they started doing the nuclear testing. And you'll notice after we start doing some things, maybe militarily at wars or whatever, all of a sudden there's more crafts around. They're checking up. They've hovered over our power plants and our military bases, and I think they're monitoring us. And they've shown us many times that, hey, they can switch off our instrumentation if they want to. you know,
Mhm.
they've done
Okay.
that a few times at some bases, and just to say, hey, guys, quit messing around with this stuff. You're going to blow yourselves up, and you don't need to do that. And you're playing with fire there when you develop that new weapon. So I see them monitoring a lot of things. And even cattle mutilations. Linda Moulton Howe said that the tissues that they take, the mucous membranes from the nose, the ass, the certain areas, eyes, those are the places where pollution can be measured most easily. If they're worried about our pollution levels, those tissues they take are good samples to look at the rates of the pollution in our environment. Now, probably a lot of people didn't think about that, but she came up with that, and I've thought that many times, that maybe that's another way of checking up on what we're doing and how our planet is making it or not.
That's interesting. Yeah, I've never heard that, and to maybe see the effect that the pollution is having on living beings.
Yep.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah. So
Well,
it's more of, yeah. Okay. I get it.
It's a theory, but it kind of all makes sense if you add all those up together.
Yeah.
Mhm. Anyway, I guess Heidi will wrap it up since John's battery's going to die here. So,
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much to everybody for watching. That was fantastic. John, thank you for being here.
Anytime.
And I will definitely be reaching out to you. And then on top of that, I know I look forward to the next Paranormally Beyond Disclosure, because every single time has been fantastic, Jim. I've been having a really good time. And yeah, just thank you, John. That was a lot of information on grays.
Well, thank you for sharing
my
your
situation.
experiences too.
Yeah.
I mean, it takes a lot to do that. I appreciate you.
Yeah. Thank you so much. And we will let you go and charge your phone.
Thank you.
Thanks. You have a good night. Thanks for coming.
All right. Thank you.
Yep. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for tuning in with us tonight. We hope you enjoyed this episode. Please be sure to like, subscribe, and follow to receive notifications when new content is made available. A Paranomaly Beyond Disclosure is looking to talk with ufologists, researchers, investigators, contactees, abductees, channelers, and more for upcoming shows. Or if you have stories, photos, videos, questions, suggestions, or comments, please contact us through Messenger or email us at paranomalypodcast@gmail.com. And you can also visit us at paranomalypodcast.com for more content and information, including all our social links. I thank you again for watching or listening, and we hope to see you on the next episode of Paranomaly Beyond Disclosure.